This part of the session makes the link between research orientation and the actual configuration of the research methods you're going to use. That configuration can be understood as research design. Now, in an ideal world, the only influence on this research design would be your research philosophy, your research orientation. However, this isn't an ideal world, therefore there will be two more aspects which will limit your choice of a research design: ethical considerations and practical constraints. There will be a separate session on ethical considerations, so we are not going to focus on that particular issue. But we are going to give some examples in which those considerations are valid in choosing your research design. We will also focus on practical constraints and give examples of that as well. Such practical issues relating to the nature of the research problem are the type of questions. So, for example, you may choose to do an applied research or a rather theoretical one. Some practical issues have to do with the nature of the research problem you are tackling. For example, the type of question you're going to try to answer through your study. Is it an applied or a theoretical question that has implications on the actual methods you're going to use and the umbrella approach to those methods? Then the audience to whom the results will be presented and assessed by is also an important practical consideration. For example, if you know that the audience has a certain understanding of a particular method, you may wish to refrain from using a more controversial method that perhaps would not be as well received by that particular audience. Then there will be restrictions to do with access to certain research settings. There would be restrictions to do with the number of subjects available to participate in the study. You may well be looking for 100 questionnaire respondents, but the time of the year perhaps, or the type of respondents you're looking for may only give you maybe 10 or 20 respondents. In that case, does it still make sense to employ a questionnaire design? And then there are the obvious practical constraints, perhaps mundane, financial, and time considerations. Things to do with. To these very central practical constraints, you will need to add ethical concerns as well, relating to, for example, potential harm to participants, lack of informed consent, issues of invasion of privacy, as well as deception. These issues will be covered later on when we will speak about the ethical approval process. Finally, to do with the previous discussion we had in this session, your research design is significantly constrained by philosophical and conceptual considerations to do with assumptions you may have about the nature of the physical and social reality you wish to research and the process through which you believe this reality can be studied, can be investigated, and indeed understood. While practical considerations may seem rather mundane and uninteresting compared to philosophical debates, they are important ones. Indeed, all social science research is a coming together of the ideal and the feasible. And here are some issues that have to do with practical and ethical considerations. For example, if you wish to investigate negotiated transfer pricing behavior in a lab experiment, you may not be able to do so due to financial and time considerations. The same type of considerations, as well as access, may apply if you, for example, try to or intend to examine the generalizability of the Hofstede's model of cultural differences using a questionnaire survey across nations. Then, if you wish to undertake research in consultants' perceptions of a particular illness and you wish to administer 100 consultants a survey, you may just not be able to get access to enough to justify your choice of a deductive approach through a questionnaire method. Then, if you wish to examine the human motives behind corporate fraud, using open unstructured interviews, for example, you may find that there will be restrictions along the way dictated by the sensitive nature of that research issue. Finally, and don't underestimate this last point, the audience may be an important practical consideration to take into account. You will need to think of the body of knowledge to which your research contributes. I'll give you an example. In certain literature areas, for example, consumer behavior, the acceptable probabilistic sample size is of about 200 plus. Now, this may be seen as highly unrealistic and very difficult to achieve in a lot of other research areas, but it isn't for consumer behavior research. So if your contribution is to consumer behavior and your questionnaire only has 50 participants, the audience to whom the results speak may render your choice of research design as inappropriate, even if it is appropriate for other areas of research. Because of these practical considerations, there will be many cases in which the nature of the research topic, the access to the research sites or to subjects for an investigation, and the constraints placed on the researcher loom large in decisions about how to design and carry out a research project. In these cases, there may well be a discrepancy between the researcher's research orientation and his or her selected research design. It is also in these cases that perhaps a pragmatist research orientation could be adopted.